Aderonke was a very beautiful young woman. She had just finished from the University of Lagos. It was there she met Olayemi, the man who would later become her husband. From the very first day they saw each other, they fell in love. Since then, they became close like glue. After school, they decided to marry. Everyone was happy for them. They found a new house along Festac Road in Lagos. The house was very fine, newly painted and big. There were 6 flats inside. Every day, women in the compound would sit outside to gist and laugh. Children ran around playing. Sweet smells of food filled the air from the kitchens. Life in the house looked peaceful, joyful, and full of love. But behind all that beauty, something dark was hiding. The day Aderonke and Olayemi went to pay for their flat, something strange happened. The flat belonged to Mrs. Abigail, a widow. She was tall, very beautiful, and always dressed like the rich women seen on magazines covers. She lived in a big mansion in Ikoyi, but owned this Festac house with 6 flats. Everyone liked her because she smiled often and spoke kindly. Even the children ran to greet her whenever she visited. But that day, as Aderonke and Olayemi entered the living room to make their payment, by the corner of the room sat a big black bird. Its eyes shone red like fire. It did not fly away, it just stared at them quietly. Mrs. Abigail only smiled and clapped her hands. Her maid quickly brought 2 cups of fresh pineapple juice and gave them to Aderonke and Olayemi. The young couple laughed, thanked her, and quickly transferred 1 million naira for flat 6. They were very happy because the house looked so fine and the money was not too much. But what they did not know was this: the house carried a secret more dangerous than the blackbird's red eyes. Aderonke and Olayemi moved into flat 6. At first, everything looked fine. The rooms were big, the walls were bright, and the compound was lively. Neighbors welcomed them with smiles. Aderonke was so happy. She decorated the house with flowers and pictures of their wedding. But after some days, strange things began to happen. At night, Aderonke would hear footsteps in the living room. Tap, tap, tap. But when she came out, no one was there. Olayemi said, "It is nothing, maybe the wind. But how can the wind sound like human feet?" One evening, while cooking, Aderonke felt something cold brush her neck. She turned quickly. Nobody was behind her. But on the kitchen window, a shadow of a big bird appeared and flapped its wings. She screamed. Olayemi rushed in, but the shadow disappeared. Another day, while Olayemi was at work, Aderonke heard a knock at the door. She opened it and saw no one. But when she looked down, she saw black feathers on the floor. Every night, the black bird appeared. Sometimes it sat on the window, sometimes on the wardrobe, sometimes on the bedpost, just staring at them with red eyes. During the day, Aderonke always felt weak. She would wake up so tired, as if she had been fighting all night. Her body felt heavy, and her eyes always looked dull. Olayemi too became weaker every morning, but they didn't understand why. The black bird never showed itself in the day. It only came at night. Each night, it sat on the window of their bedroom, its red eyes shining, watching them as they lay quietly on the bed. But here was a secret no one knew. The black bird was not an ordinary bird. It was Mrs. Abigail. At night, when the moon rose, Mrs. Abigail would change into a big black vulture. She would spread her giant wings and fly from her mansion in Ikoyi to the estate in Festac. She would perch on the windows of her tenants one by one. She was not just watching, she was feeding. She fed on their peace. She fed on their happiness. When a woman in the flats became pregnant, the vulture would come at night, sit by the window and suck away the life of the baby until the woman lost it mysteriously. Every morning after a night of stealing, the bird would fly back to Ikoyi. There, inside her dark room, Mrs. Abigail would turn back into herself. She would sit on a big black royal chair, laughing and clapping her hands. "Another job well done," she would whisper. No one could understand why Mrs. Abigail looked so fresh, so young and so beautiful, even though she was already old. The truth was that all the good things she stole, the joy, the peace, the happiness of her tenants, made her stronger, richer and gave her long life. She glowed more and more while her tenant grew weaker and sadder. And still, every night, the black bird returned. One of the tenants, Miss Regina, lived in flat 1. She was a young lady with a bright smile. Just a week ago, she had gotten a good job at a big telecommunication company in Lekki. She was so happy that she decided to celebrate with her neighbors. That evening, the whole compound was full of joy. The men drank and laughed loudly. The women danced and clapped their hands. The children ran about, eating food and sweets until their bellies were full. Everyone was happy for Regina. But far away, inside a mansion in Ikoyi, Mrs. Abigail was watching. She sat on a big black royal chair in the middle of her room. Before her was a wide black pot filled with strange ancient water. In the water, she could see everything happening in the compound. Regina smiling, neighbors dancing, children laughing. Mrs. Abigail's face grew dark. She wanted Regina's joy. That night, when the whole estate was quiet and Regina slept soundly in her bed, Mrs. Abigail changed. She transformed into the big black vulture and spread her wings wide. She flew high above the city until she reached Festac. There she landed softly by Regina's window. Her red eyes glowed in the dark. Slowly she stretched her neck and looked straight at Regina as she slept peacefully. Then she sucked all her joy, all her happiness, and all her blessing. Regina's body shivered in her sleep, but before she could wake, the bird was gone, vanishing into the dark night sky. The vulture flew back to Ikoyi, and once inside her room, it turned again into Mrs. Abigail. She sat down in her black chair and smiled, clapping her hands in wicked joy. "Another job well done," she said. The next morning, Regina woke up looking fresh and bright. She put on a white shirt and blue trousers, and with her bag in hand, she stepped out of her flat. She greeted Mrs. Bode, who was sweeping the compound, then entered the ride she had booked to work. But something strange happened at the office. Her boss sent for her. He shouted at her and accused her of being careless and incompetent. Before Regina could defend herself, she was sacked from the job, a job she had barely started. Her world collapsed. She went back home, shut the door, and cried bitterly on her bed. And far away in Ikoyi, Mrs. Abigail watched everything inside a black pot of water. She threw her head back and laughed loudly, her voice echoing across the empty room. In flat 4 lived Mr. and Mrs. Nwosu. At first they were a happy couple, but soon things changed. Every day and every night they fought. They shouted at each other over little things, food, money, even silence. There was no peace in their home. The fight grew worse until Mrs. Nwosu packed her bags and left. She moved away, leaving Mr. Nwosu all alone. From then, he began drinking heavily. Every evening, he went from bar to bar, drinking until he staggered on the road. Sometimes he fell into the gutter and neighbors had to pull him out. The once happy man became a shadow of himself. Aderonke noticed all this and wondered what was happening to everyone in the compound. One sunny afternoon, Aderonke was in her living room watching television. Olayemi had gone to work. She stood up to get water, but suddenly her head felt light. She grabbed her forehead and sat back quickly. She had no idea what was wrong. That night she told her husband, and the next day they went to the hospital. The doctor smiled and gave them good news. "Congratulations, you are pregnant." The couple was filled with joy. They hugged each other tightly and returned home with laughter in their hearts. That evening, Aderonke stood in front of her mirror, rubbing her flat tummy. She smiled and whispered to herself, "Wow, I will soon be a mother." But far away in Ikoyi, Mrs. Abigail was watching inside her black pot of water. She saw Aderonke's joy, and she smiled wickedly. "I know what to do next," she whispered. That same night, as the couple slept, the big black vulture appeared again. Its wings spread wide as it landed softly on their bedroom window. The red eyes glowed in the darkness like fire. Slowly, it hopped onto the bed, its gaze fixed on Aderonke. With its long neck, it stretched forward. Its sharp eyes burned as it bent low and sucked out the life of her pregnancy. When it was done, the bird vanished into the night sky. Aderonke suddenly woke up with a sharp pain in her stomach. She rushed to the bathroom only to see blood. She screamed loudly. Olayemi ran after her. The next morning, the doctor confirmed their worst fear. The pregnancy was gone. Aderonke cried bitterly. She wept and wept, her hands shaking. Olayemi tried to comfort her, holding her close, but nothing could heal the pain inside her heart. Far away, Mrs. Abigail sat on her black chair, laughing in her room. She had stolen another joy, another blessing, and her face glowed brighter with evil beauty. One afternoon, the sky turned very dark. Heavy clouds gathered as rain was about to fall. In flat 2, Nurse Uju began coughing suddenly. Her cough was strange, like something was choking her. She ran out to the backyard where a banana tree stood. There, she started vomiting blood. At that same time, Aderonke was outside, gathering her clothes she had spread to dry. She saw Uju struggling and quickly rushed to help. She held her back, crying, sorry, don't worry, you'll be fine." But Uju's vomiting grew worse, until with one last shake, she collapsed and died. Aderonke screamed loudly, Jesus, Jesus! Her cry drew all the neighbors, who ran to see what had happened. With tears in her eyes and her hands shaking, she told them what had just happened. Not long after, the police came and carried Aderonke away for questioning. She screamed as they dragged her, and suddenly she woke up. It was a dream. Sweat poured down her face as she sat up on the bed. Olayemi, her husband, held her tightly. "Baby, it's just a dream. You are safe," he whispered. But Aderonke was too shaken to speak. She just held her husband's hand with fear in her eyes. The next morning was Saturday. Over a bowl of pounded yam and soup, she told her husband about the dream. Olayemi laughed gently. "It was only a dream, my love. Don't worry yourself." But just minutes later, a scream came from flat 2. A small boy had returned with recharge card he bought for Nurse Uju. But when he entered her room, he found her dead. Her eyes were wide open, as if she had seen something very terrifying before she died. Aderonke and Olayemi rushed there with other neighbors. They saw Uju's lifeless body. Ronke screamed and almost fainted, but Olayemi held her, pulling her away from the sad sight. When they got back inside their flat, Aderonke broke down crying. "I saw it, Yemi. I saw it in my dream. This house is evil. These things happen here every day. This is a sign." Olayemi held her shoulders firmly. "My love, this is just a coincidence. Please calm down." The following week, Olayemi was sent on an official trip to Ghana for 2 weeks. When he told Aderonke, she felt uneasy. "Baby, please can I call my mother to come and stay with me? I don't want to be alone in this house," so she begged. Olayemi agreed. The next day, Aderonke's mother, Mrs. Brown, arrived in a white Camry with a suitcase. The moment she stepped her foot into the compound, she felt something heavy and dark in the air. "Blood of Jesus," she whispered under her breath as she entered flat 6. "Mommy!" Aderonke cried, running to hug her tightly. She carried her bag into the room, then served her a bowl of rice and stew. They both relaxed in the living room and talked. Mrs. Brown looked serious. "I felt a strange evil force in this house, Aderonke." Her daughter leaned forward, tears in her eyes. "Mommy, I know. Strange things happen here every day. I told Yemi the other day, but he didn't believe me. Mama, I am tired." Mrs. Brown took her hand and said, "Don't be afraid. I just finished a 21 days fasting and prayer in my church. I brought the anointing oil our pastor gave us. Tonight, by midnight, we will anoint the whole house and pray." That night, they prayed loudly. They poured oil on the windows, the doors, and every corner of the house. Their prayers filled the room with fire and light. Far away in Ikoyi, Mrs. Abigail suddenly felt uneasy. She looked into her black pot of water, but saw nothing. She hissed in anger. "What is happening? Who dares disturb my peace?" She quickly entered a small coven filled with skulls, calabashes, and red charms. She uncovered a black mirror and chanted incantations, but still she saw nothing. Frustrated, she hissed and transformed into a vulture form. She flew into the night sky towards Festac. When she reached the estate, she landed softly on the banana tree at the backyard of Flat 6. She wanted to spy on her tenant, to know what was going on, but as soon as she tried, a hot burning fire filled the air. She screeched and flapped her wings. The fire was too strong, too unbearable for her to stay. She tried again, but the fire grew hotter, pressing against her. She knew she would destroy herself if she remained there. With one last cry, she flew back to Ikoyi. When she returned to her apartment, she was so weak, she transformed back into Mrs. Abigail and collapsed on the floor, panting. For the first time, she could not understand what had happened. 2 weeks passed quickly, and Olayemi finally returned from his trip to Ghana. To his surprise, the house looked calm and peaceful. All through those 2 weeks, Mrs. Brown and Aderonke had prayed day and night. Since that night of anointing, Mrs. Abigail never came back again. The black vulture did not return. For the first time in a long while, the compound was peaceful. Aderonke slept peacefully. No footsteps, no red eyes, no nightmares. She smiled again and her heart felt lighter. The whole house seemed calm, as though the darkness had been pushed away. But soon it was time for Mrs. Brown to return to her own home. That morning, Aderonke held her mother's hands tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Mommy, I will miss you dearly," she said, crying like a little child. Mrs. Brown wiped her tears and hugged her warmly. "Don't cry, my daughter. Always remember to pray." Just then, the ride they booked arrived. Mrs. Brown entered with her suitcase, waved at her daughter and Olayemi, and the car drove off slowly. Aderonke stood there watching, her chest heavy. She wiped her face and leaned on her husband. For the first time in weeks, she felt both safe and afraid at the same time. Far away in Ikoyi mansion, Mrs. Abigail watched the car vanish. She smirked wickedly. "Finally," she whispered, "I can return to my duties in that house." That same night, she spread her black wings and descended on Emeka's window. Emeka had just received a scholarship and visa to study abroad. His joy was overflowing as he admired his passport by his bedside. Before he finally slept off, the vulture landed softly on the passport, sucking the joy out of it until it vanished into thin air. By morning, Emeka woke up in confusion, searching desperately. "I placed it here now, eh? I placed it here. I am very sure," he muttered, drenched in sweat, his heart racing. From her evil pot, Mrs. Abigail watched, laughing hysterically. "Perfect. All your joy is mine now." But her wicked eyes soon caught sight of Ronke glowing with happiness. She had discovered she was pregnant again. Since her mother left, Ronke had never stopped praying. Every night, she anointed the doors, windows and corners of the house with oil her mother had given her. Olayemi, now on a month's leave, pampered her endlessly. He cooked, cleaned and even shopped for her. Their laughter filled the house and joy returned like sunshine after a storm. But joy was what Mrs. Abigail could not tolerate. From her black pot, she saw Ronke's pregnancy. Her lips coiled into a cruel smile. "So, you think you can defeat me, little girl, eh? This time, I will finish what I started." That night, the vulture spread her wings and flew straight to Festac. She landed quietly at Ronke's window. But to her surprise, Ronke was not asleep. She was in the living room, kneeling in prayer, her voice strong, her hands lifted high. Mrs. Abigail frowned. Something about the atmosphere disturbed her, but she pressed forward. She flapped her wings silently towards the window, but suddenly felt an unseen heat radiating from inside the living room. A fire too hot, too holy, blocked her. Screeching, she retreated and perched angrily on the banana tree at the backyard waiting. Hours passed. Finally, Ronke finished her prayers, kissed her husband's forehead and lay beside him. She placed her Bible gently on her stomach and drifted into sleep. The vulture seized her chance. She glided back in and aimed directly for Ronke's belly to suck out the unborn child's joy. But just as she landed, a blinding light burst forth from the Bible. It shone so fiercely that it struck the vulture to the ground. She screamed, thrashing in pain. Ronke and Olayemi jumped awake, terrified. They gasped when they saw the black vulture writhing on the floor. Jesus! Ronke screamed, clinging to her husband. Olayemi looked at the time. It was past 5 a.m. Dawn already breaking. He took a very big packer and carried the vulture outside the compound. Then he called the attentions of the other neighbors, who also came outside to see the vulture. They all gasped in shock at the sight of the big vulture. Before their eyes, the vulture convulsed violently. At exactly 6 a.m., before the whole compound stunned gaze, the creature transformed back into Mrs. Abigail. The whole neighbors screamed when they saw the transformation. Shock spread like wildfire. The children ran to their mother's back in fear. Men gasped in horror. Mrs. Abigail sat weak and helpless on the ground. And once beautiful skin was pale, her body shaking. Then with trembling lips, she confessed, I took your joy. I took Emeka's passport. I destroyed Regina's job. I ruined Mr. Nwosu's home. I made him drink and drink. I killed Nosunju. I stopped Ronke's first pregnant. I am a witch. The crowd roared in anger. Stones flew from every corner. Women screamed prayers. Men cursed her wickedness. Mrs. Abigail cried bitterly, her body weakening until she collapsed flat on the ground and breathed her last. There was silence. Then one by one, the tenant began to weep, some in relief, some in sorrow for the damage she had done. Ronke clutched Olayemi's arm. Now you see why my spirit was never at peace, she whispered. He pulled her close, guilt written on his face. I am sorry for doubting you, my love. Never again. Within days, the compound emptied. Emeka left. Regina relocated. Mr. Nwosu moved out. Olayemi finally completed his secret project, a beautiful house in Lekki. By the next week, he and Ronke moved in. Their new home was filled with peace. Months later, Mrs. Brown returned, this time to witness a double blessing. Ronke gave birth to elder twins, a boy and a girl. Joy overflowed. Songs of thanksgiving filled the air. What the enemy meant for evil had been turned for good. And in that moment, Ronke understood. Light will always overcome darkness. The moral lesson from this story is that evil may flourish for a while, but it can never last forever. The power of prayer is stronger than the scheme of darkness. Never ignore the warnings of your loved ones. Sometimes they see what you cannot see. And unity in marriage is a shield. When couples stand together, the enemy finds no space to enter. Greed, jealousy, and wickedness only lead to destruction. Light will always overcome darkness no matter how thick the night is. Every hidden evil one day will be exposed in the open. Peace and joy come when we trust God fully and refuse to give fear a place